James woke up early in the morning. The sun was just rising, and soft orange light filled the sky. He looked out of his small wooden house window. Outside, the birds were singing, and the wind gently moved the leaves of the big old trees near his home. It was a peaceful morning. James loved this place. He had lived here for many years. The land around his house was quiet and calm. It was not far from the city, but it felt like a different world. The house was small but cozy. Behind the house was a big barn, made of old wood. It was not very fancy, but it was strong and full of memories. The barn was very important to James. It was his pride and joy. He had built it with his own hands many years ago. He remembered how hard he worked to put every nail and board in place. The barn was not just a building, it was a place where he kept his tools, old furniture, and many things he had collected over time. It was also where he dreamed about his future. James's family had lived on this land for many years. His father had told him stories about the barn and the land. It was a place where they could work and live happily. For James, the barn was a symbol of his hard work and hope. Every time he looked at it, he felt proud. Near James's property was a big, beautiful lake. The water was clear and calm, and the sun's reflection made it sparkle like diamonds. Around the lake was a resort owned by the Homeowners Association, or HOA. The resort was fancy, with big houses and green lawns. People came there to relax and enjoy the fresh air. The HOA had strict rules about how the land near the lake should look. They said everything must be perfect and clean. James did not belong to the HOA. His land was just next to it, but not inside. He liked to keep to himself and did not care much about the fancy resort. He was happy with his quiet life. He did not need big houses or expensive things. He just wanted to live simply and peacefully. Each morning, James walked to his barn. He liked to open the big wooden doors and look inside. Sometimes, he cleaned the barn or fixed things. Other times, he just sat inside and thought. The barn was his safe place. One day, James was working in his barn. He was fixing a broken chair when he heard a car stop outside. He looked up and saw a man in a clean suit walking toward him. The man was from the HOA. He had a serious face. "Good morning, James," the man said politely. "I am Mr. Collins from the HOA. We need to talk about your barn." James felt a little nervous. He put down his tools and listened carefully. "We have received complaints," Mr. Collins said. "The HOA rules say that buildings near the lake must be approved by us. Your barn does not have permission. We have to remove it." James was shocked. "Remove it? But this is my barn. I built it myself. It has been here for many years." Mr. Collins shook his head. "I am sorry, but the rules are clear. We must protect the beauty of the lake and the resort. Your barn breaks these rules." James did not know what to say. He felt a deep pain inside. The barn was more than wood and nails, it was his life. How could they just say it must go? Days passed, and James tried to talk to the HOA leaders. He wrote letters, but they did not answer. He went to their meetings, but no one listened. The rich people in the resort did not want to hear him. One morning, James woke up to a loud noise outside. He ran to his barn and saw machines and workers tearing it down. The wood fell to the ground with heavy thuds. James's heart broke as he watched his dreams fall apart. Neighbors from the resort watched silently. Some did not even look at him. James felt lonely and angry. He wanted to cry but held back his tears. How could this happen to him? That night, James sat on the porch of his house, staring at the empty space where the barn once stood. The sky was dark, and the stars were shining. He thought about his family and the stories his father told him. He felt lost. But deep inside, James knew he could not give up. The barn may be gone, but his spirit was still strong. He promised himself he would find a way to fight for what was right. The land was his home, and he would not leave without a struggle. The quiet lake reflected the moonlight. James looked at the water and felt a small hope grow inside. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. The morning after the barn was torn down, James woke up feeling a heavy weight on his chest. The space behind his house where the barn once stood was empty now, just dirt and broken wood scattered on the ground. The cold wind blew through the empty place, making it feel even lonelier. James walked slowly to the spot, his heart sinking with every step. The barn had been his safe place, his hard work, and his hope. Now it was gone. He knelt down and touched the broken pieces of wood. Each piece felt like a broken dream. He thought about calling the HOA, hoping to find answers. But when he looked at the letter they had sent weeks ago, he realized it had come late. The letter was buried deep in the mailbox, and James had just found it. It said his barn was not allowed and that he had to remove it. But no one told him they would send workers to destroy it. James felt angry and hurt. How could they take away something so important without even talking to him first? He remembered all the long hours he spent building the barn, fixing it, and dreaming about what it could become. Now, all of that was gone in a few hours. He tried to talk to his neighbors, but they did not want to listen. The people living in the fancy resort saw things differently. To them, James's barn was ugly and against the rules. They cared more about their clean lawns and perfect views than about his feelings or his history. James felt alone in the world. His friends were far away, and no one from the city seemed to understand what he was going through. He spent his days walking around the empty space where the barn once stood, thinking about what to do next. One afternoon, James decided to visit the lake near the resort. The water was calm and peaceful. Children played by the shore, and families enjoyed picnics on the grass. It was hard to believe the same people who were laughing and having fun were the ones who had destroyed his barn. James sat on a bench by the water. He watched the sun shine on the lake, making it sparkle like glass. He thought about the dam valve he had seen near the edge of the lake. The valve controlled the water flow and the lake's water level. It was an important part of the resort's land. He wondered, if the HOA had so much power over his land, could he find a way to have some power too? Could he use what he knew about the lake to make them listen to him? The thought stayed in his mind like a small spark. That evening, James went back home. He sat on his porch, looking at the dark sky. He thought about the barn, the lake, and the unfairness of it all. But he also thought about his father's stories, how they always told him to be strong and never give up. James knew the road ahead would be difficult. The HOA was rich and had lawyers and rules on their side. But James had something they did not: his heart and his determination. He decided to start small. First, he would learn everything he could about the lake and the dam valve. Maybe he could find a way to protect his land and his home. Maybe he could make the HOA see that he was not someone to ignore. For the next few days, James walked along the edge of the lake. He watched the water carefully and studied the dam valve. It was a large metal wheel, rusty but strong. When he turned it a little, he could feel the water level change slowly. He realized that the valve was a key to controlling the lake. If he could shut it or turn it, the water level would go down. It would cause problems for the resort. It was risky, but it was something he could do to stand up for himself. James knew he had to be careful. If the HOA found out, they might try to punish him. But he also knew that sometimes, to fight unfairness, a person had to take risks. One night, James sat at his kitchen table with a notebook. He wrote down ideas and plans. He thought about talking to the neighbors, but he was not sure they would listen. Many of them were afraid of the HOA. Still, James felt a small hope growing inside him. He was not alone. His barn might be gone, but his spirit was alive. He was ready to fight back, not with anger, but with courage. As the moon rose high in the sky, James looked out of his window toward the lake. The water was calm and bright under the moonlight. The world was quiet, but inside James, a fire was burning. He whispered to himself, "I won't let them take everything from me. Not without a fight." Days passed, but James did not give up. Every morning, he woke up early and walked by the lake. He watched the water carefully and checked the dam valve again. The metal wheel was big and old, but it still worked. He saw how small changes could affect the water level. James thought about what to do next. He knew he could not fight the HOA with words or letters, they had too much power. The lawyers and rich people always won. But maybe he could use the dam valve to make them listen. It was risky, but James was ready to try. He did not tell anyone about his plan. He kept it a secret. He was afraid that if the HOA found out, they would come after him even harder. But inside, James felt strong. This was his land, and he would protect it. One evening, James walked to the dam. The sky was orange and pink as the sun set. The air was cool, and the birds sang their last songs of the day. He reached the big metal valve. It was heavy, and the rust made it hard to turn. James grabbed the wheel with both hands and pushed with all his strength. Slowly, the valve moved. James felt a small thrill inside. The water began to flow differently. He stepped back and watched the lake's surface change. The water level was going down, little by little. James knew this was only the beginning. He did not close the valve completely. Instead, he made a small change enough to slow the flow but not cause too much damage. He wanted the HOA to notice, to worry, but not to hurt anyone. That night, James went home and slept with his mind busy. He thought about the consequences. Would the HOA find out? Would they blame him? What would happen next? The next morning, the HOA sent workers to check the dam. The people who lived in the fancy resort started talking about the lake's water level. Some were angry. The lake was their pride, and now something was wrong. James watched from his porch. He saw the worried faces of the HOA leaders. They did not know who was behind the water problem. James smiled quietly. For the first time in weeks, he felt he had power. Days went by, and James kept turning the valve a little more, slowly lowering the water level. The HOA became more and more anxious. They held meetings and hired experts to find the cause, but no one could explain it. At the same time, James stayed careful. He did not want to cause harm to the people who lived near the lake. His fight was not against them but against the unfair rules that destroyed his barn and ignored his rights. James's friends noticed that he was different. He was quieter but stronger. He did not talk much about the barn anymore. Instead, he worked on his plan silently. He repaired his small house and fixed the fence around his land. One afternoon, a young woman from the resort came to James's door. Her name was Lisa. She was one of the few neighbors who believed the HOA might be wrong. She looked nervous but hopeful. "James," she said softly, "I want to help you. I don't agree with how the HOA treated you. Maybe together, we can find a way to fix this." James was surprised but grateful. He invited Lisa inside. They talked for hours about the barn, the lake, and the HOA's power. Lisa said she would try to speak to her neighbors and find more people who wanted change. James felt less alone. For the first time, he had an ally. Over the next weeks, Lisa and James met often. They shared ideas and plans. Lisa showed James how to speak to the HOA leaders with calm words instead of anger. James taught Lisa about the lake and the dam valve. One day, Lisa said, "If we work together, maybe we can stop the HOA from being so unfair. Maybe we can bring everyone together." James nodded. "I hope so. But for now, I need to keep the water flowing just right. They have to know I am serious." Lisa smiled. "We will find a way, James. You are not alone anymore." James looked out at the lake, feeling hope for the first time in a long while. The water was still moving, and the sun was shining. The barn was gone, but his fight was just beginning. The days grew warmer as summer slowly took hold of the small community near the lake. James woke up every morning with a new sense of determination. The empty space behind his house where the barn had once stood still made his heart ache, but he no longer felt defeated. Instead, he felt ready to take a stand. He had been slowly turning the dam valve, causing the lake's water level to drop bit by bit. It was a quiet, careful resistance enough to make the HOA nervous but not enough to harm anyone. Yet James knew that if he wanted to make a real difference, he needed to take a bigger step. One evening, as the sky blushed with pink and purple, James sat on his porch thinking deeply. Lisa had been coming around often, bringing him news from the resort neighbors. Some of them were starting to question the HOA's harsh rules. A few families whispered about how the HOA treated people unfairly, especially James. But the HOA leaders were stubborn and proud. They acted like they owned everything: the lake, the land, even the people. James knew they wouldn't change easily. That night, James walked to the edge of the lake. The water was lower than usual, and the soft mud showed where the shoreline had moved back. The lake, the jewel of the resort, was beginning to lose its shine. James looked at the big dam valve again. He touched the cool metal wheel, feeling its weight in his hands. Turning it more would lower the water even faster. It could cause real trouble for the HOA. He knew it could cause them to panic. His mind raced. Was he ready to take that risk? What if the HOA found out it was him? Could they make things worse for him? Could they hurt him or force him off his land? But then, he thought about the barn. The way it had been destroyed without a word. The way his dreams had been crushed. The way no one in the community seemed to care. James's heart grew heavy, but his resolve became stronger. He made his decision. The next morning, before the sun even rose, James dressed quietly and took a small toolbox with him. He walked to the dam under the soft light of dawn. The world was still, except for the sound of water moving slowly through the pipes. James gripped the valve firmly and began to turn. This time, he pushed harder, turning the wheel farther than before. The metal creaked, and water started to flow out faster. Slowly but surely, the lake's water level began to drop. As the day passed, James watched the lake carefully from a distance. The water shrank more than before, revealing muddy patches and old tree roots. The HOA residents started to notice. Some looked worried, others angry. At the resort's clubhouse, the HOA leaders held an emergency meeting. They called experts and engineers to find the cause of the problem. No one suspected James, but the pressure was on to fix the lake fast. James stayed home, feeling the weight of his actions. He was nervous but also proud. He was standing up for himself in a way that the HOA couldn't ignore. That afternoon, Lisa came by. She had heard about the lake's dropping water level and was worried. "James," she said softly, "are you sure about this? It's getting serious. Some people might get hurt." James nodded slowly. "I know. But they tore down my barn without any warning. They didn't listen to me. This is the only way I have to be heard." Lisa looked at him with respect and sadness. "I understand. Just be careful. We want to win this fight, not lose." James smiled faintly. "Thank you, Lisa. I will be careful." As the sun set, James sat quietly on his porch, watching the stars appear one by one. The lake was still shrinking, and the quiet tension in the air was growing. He knew the next few days would be difficult. The HOA would search harder. They might come looking for him. But James felt ready. He was no longer the man who watched his barn fall to the ground without a word. He was a man with a purpose, a man who would fight for his home, his land, and his dignity. The quiet resistance was over. Now, the real fight was just beginning. The water level in the lake continued to drop day by day. The once sparkling lake now showed muddy banks and hidden tree roots. The peaceful resort community grew uneasy. People who once enjoyed quiet mornings by the water now whispered worriedly about what was happening. Inside the fancy houses, the HOA leaders met more often. Their faces were tense and serious. They could not understand why the lake was losing water. Engineers came and went, checking pipes and valves, but no one could find the cause. The residents began to talk about the problem at breakfast tables and in the golf clubhouse. Some blamed nature, saying the drought was to blame. Others suspected something strange was going on. But no one knew the truth. James watched all this from his small porch. He saw the fear and confusion in the faces of the HOA leaders. Every day, they grew more desperate to fix the lake. And every day, James felt a mix of hope and worry. Hope because he was finally being noticed. Worry because he knew the HOA might try to find the person behind the water problem and punish them. One morning, a letter arrived at James's house. It was from the HOA. The paper was thick and official, with the HOA's logo at the top. James opened it carefully. The letter demanded that he stop interfering with the lake and the dam immediately. It warned of serious legal action if the problem did not end. James felt a chill run down his spine. The HOA had found out, or at least they suspected. He knew the fight was getting more dangerous. But James also felt stronger. He had stood quietly for too long, watching his barn be destroyed and his rights ignored. Now, the HOA had to face him. That same day, Lisa came to see him. Her face was full of concern. "James," she said softly, "they sent you a warning. You have to be careful. They might try to take your land or worse." James nodded. "I know. But I can't stop now. This is bigger than me." Lisa looked at him with sadness. "I want to help. Maybe we can talk to some of the neighbors." Not everyone agrees with the HOA. James thought about this. He knew Lisa was right. If more people spoke out, the HOA might have to listen. Over the next few days, Lisa and James started talking to some neighbors quietly. A few people said they felt the HOA was too harsh and unfair. They had seen how James was treated and thought it was wrong. But many were afraid. The HOA was powerful, and no one wanted to lose their home or be in trouble. Still, a small group began to form. They met in secret, sharing stories and ideas. They talked about how to stand together and ask the HOA to change its rules. Meanwhile, the lake water level dropped even more. The beach where children played was shrinking. Boats could no longer float easily. Some of the HOA residents grew angry and blamed James for the trouble. One afternoon, James was walking near the lake when a group of HOA members confronted him. Their faces were angry and full of suspicion. "You're causing this problem," one man shouted. "We know it's you. You're trying to hurt our community." James stood his ground. "I am not trying to hurt anyone. I am only trying to be heard. You tore down my barn without a word." The group argued back, but James did not back down. He spoke calmly but firmly, telling them about his barn, his land, and the unfair rules. Some of the HOA members listened. Others just walked away, angry and unwilling to understand. The tension in the community was rising. Some neighbors supported James quietly, while others stayed loyal to the HOA. The peaceful resort was no longer peaceful. At home, James felt tired but determined. He talked with Lisa about what to do next. They knew the fight would get harder, but they also knew they had started something important. One evening, as the sun set, James looked out over the lake. The water was low, but the sky was bright with hope. He knew the road ahead was difficult, but he was ready to face it. The fight was no longer just about a barn or a lake. It was about respect, fairness, and standing up for what was right. And James was ready. The days grew hotter as the summer sun blazed down on the small community by the lake. The water level kept falling, and everyone felt the change. The sparkling lake that once brought joy was now a muddy, shrinking pond. James and Lisa continued to work quietly together. Their small group of neighbors who wanted change grew slowly. They met in homes, backyards, and sometimes under the shade of trees near the lake. They shared their stories and fears, but most importantly, they talked about hope. One afternoon, Lisa suggested they hold a community meeting. It was risky. The HOA controlled many things, and some people were scared to speak up. But Lisa believed that if they gathered enough voices, the HOA might have to listen. James was nervous but agreed. "We need to show them we are not alone," he said. "If more people stand with us, we can change things." They chose a small community hall far from the resort. Notices were quietly sent to those neighbors who wanted to come. The word spread slowly, but soon, on the day of the meeting, a small group arrived. The room was simple, with folding chairs and a big window looking out at the lake. James looked around and saw familiar faces. Some were neighbors he had never spoken to, others were friends of Lisa. Lisa stood up first. "Thank you all for coming," she said warmly. "We are here because we believe the HOA's rules are unfair. They took James's barn without a real reason. Now the lake is losing water. We want to talk and find a better way." James took a deep breath and spoke next. "My barn was more than just wood. It was my home, my history. The HOA tore it down without listening. I tried to talk, but they didn't care. Now, the lake is dropping because I have been trying to make them notice. We want respect and fairness." People nodded quietly. Some wiped tears. A few spoke up about their own problems with the HOA's strict rules about their homes, unfair fines, and the fear of losing their property. A woman named Maria, who lived near the lake, stood and said, "I have been too scared to speak. The HOA controls everything here. But I believe James is right. We should not live in fear. We deserve respect." The room grew louder as more neighbors shared their stories. The community that had been silent for so long was finally finding its voice. James felt hope rising inside him. He saw that he was not alone. The HOA was powerful, but together, the neighbors were stronger. After the meeting, Lisa and James talked about their next steps. They decided to write a letter to the HOA, signed by everyone who came to the meeting. The letter asked for fair treatment, a stop to the lake's water loss, and a meeting with the HOA leaders. Days later, the letter was delivered to the HOA office. It surprised the leaders. They had not expected so many neighbors to stand together. The HOA called a meeting and invited James and Lisa. It was the first time they would meet face to face. On the day of the meeting, James felt nervous but prepared. He wore his best shirt and carried a folder with notes. Lisa came with him for support. The meeting took place in a large conference room. The HOA leaders sat on one side of the table, looking serious. James and Lisa sat opposite, with the letter and their hopes. James spoke clearly and calmly. "We want to work together, not fight. The barn was part of my life, and the lake is part of all our lives. We want respect and fairness from the HOA. We want to be heard." The HOA leader, Mr. Collins, looked at James carefully. "We understand your feelings," he said slowly. "But the rules are in place to protect the community. The lake and the resort must stay beautiful and safe." Lisa added, "We agree that the community is important. But rules should not hurt people. We want to find a way to protect both the lake and the neighbors." The discussion went on for hours. The HOA leaders listened more than before. James and Lisa spoke from their hearts, sharing the community's fears and hopes. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Collins said, "We will review the rules and work with you to find solutions. We want the community to thrive." James and Lisa left the meeting feeling tired but hopeful. It was not a victory yet, but it was a start. That night, James looked at the lake from his porch. The water was still low, but the fight was changing. The community was waking up, and their voices were growing louder. James smiled softly. He knew the road was long, but he was ready to walk it not just for himself but for everyone who called this land home. The weeks after the meeting were full of change. James noticed the lake water slowly returning to normal. The HOA had listened, at least for now. The pressure from the neighbors was clear, and the leaders knew they could not ignore the community. James felt lighter. The barn was gone, but something new was growing, respect and hope. The neighbors who had stayed silent for so long were now talking and helping each other. James and Lisa became a quiet symbol of courage. One sunny morning, James woke up early. He walked to the spot where his barn had stood. The ground was still bare, but James no longer felt pain there. Instead, he saw a chance for a new start. Lisa joined him with a small box of seeds and some tools. "Let's plant a garden," she said with a smile. "Something to bring life back." James smiled too. Together, they started digging and planting. Neighbors came by to help, bringing flowers, vegetables, and even a few small trees. The empty space slowly turned green and bright. The garden became a place for the community to gather, to talk, and to heal. Children played among the plants, and adults shared stories and laughter. It was a new kind of home, built not from wood but from hope. Meanwhile, the HOA began working with James and the neighbors. They agreed to change some of the rules to be fairer. They promised to listen before making decisions that affected the community. It was not perfect. There were still arguments and hard days. But things were better than before. One afternoon, James received a letter in the mail. It was from the city council. The letter said they had reviewed his case and recognized his right to have his barn. They invited him to speak at a community event about fairness and respect. James felt proud and a little nervous. He knew his fight had helped many people. His story was not just about a barn or a lake, it was about standing up for what was right. At the community event, James spoke clearly and honestly. He told the story of his barn, the HOA, and the neighbors who came together. People listened quietly, some with tears in their eyes. When James finished, the crowd clapped. He looked at Lisa and the friends who had supported him. They smiled back with pride. That night, James stood by the lake again. The water was calm and shining under the moonlight. The garden was quiet and peaceful. James thought about the journey he had taken from loss and anger to hope and friendship. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, but he also knew he was not alone. The barn was gone, but something stronger remained, a community united and a man who would never stop fighting for what he believed in. As the stars twinkled above, James whispered softly to himself, "This is just the beginning."